Hey, everybody, welcome to the HuMAN podcast, where we believe that you have generations, infinite potential ready to unleash, just like my friend Jeff Stucke. You probably wake up every day just thinking that, like, I have infinite generations of potential ready to unleash on the world.
Yes, that's what I like. Wait, what were the words again? Like infinite generational
Infinite
potential.
generations of potential. So, bringing in
Yeah,
the
I've been thinking about that for
anthropology.
yeah. Since I was 4 years old, I have woke up thinking that thought. And now, 50 years later, it's come to fruition, man.
It's happening. It is happening.
We are about to release our collective infinite generational potential. Let's
That's
fucking
exactly right.
go. Let's fucking go.
Well, here's my problem with our topic today.
Oh, okay.
I have some broad interests, financial podcasts, philosophy podcasts, a lot of physiology, and I don't care who you are. Everybody is talking about masculinity. They're talking about the male crisis, talking about toxic masculinity, reclaiming masculinity. You have been a marriage and family therapist for 25, maybe going on 30 years. Um,
Somewhere between there, yeah.
I'm guessing when men come to you, maybe with marital problems, maybe with just self-esteem issues and purposelessness, you have to weave some of that in somewhere. You're probably taking some kind of personality inventory and saying, you know what? I think we probably need to work on this. How do you view the whole topic that is so hot right now in terms of attention on masculinity?
I would say attention long overdue. I would, early on as a marriage therapist, even when I didn't know my ass from a hole in the ground, it was obvious that men, when they came to marriage therapy, whether, their wife said, go get some fucking help or I'm going to divorce you, or, within the context of a couple, I would define men as more of a reaction. They were, it was almost like mommy taking her little boy to the principal's office and here's what Tommy's been doing. And Tommy explained to him what a bad boy you have been. And, Tommy's like covered in shame and, somewhat resident to even speak at all. And I know this sounds like hyperbole, Joe, but it's really not. I mean, this is a fairly accurate representation of the emotional dynamic. And it was like, what is going on? And in earnest, so when I saw my first client and I'm 28 years old, don't know shit about fuck, have a full-blown panic attack. I'm like sweating as if I ran a marathon, sitting in a therapy session. That's bad for business. Like when your clients are comforting you, like, are you okay? Yeah, yeah, there's a Xanax over there in my top shelf. No, it wasn't quite that bad, but I was sweating profusely. But it was simultaneously this sense of urgency, but then also a mirror of reflection of like, fuck, am I any better off? And in the father lottery, I got fucked. I just like, no influence would have been better than the influence that I received, and I can illustrate that in a number of ways as we go on. So I've always been in the quest of an archetype of some paternal kind of influence. My early gravitations went towards Mr. Rogers. You know, we can psychoanalyze that, but it was just something that was like, I have to have something to move towards. So then I'm just kind of in this period of men don't know who they are. I don't know if I know who I am. And so really at the genesis of my practice, this became something that was it was an obvious need in the clients that I was seeing, and it was also became more glaring that it was something that I had a lot of work to do in myself.
So I think we're obviously going to extend the time that we talked about off camera with our goal. There's no way we're going to cover this in a short amount of time because you may not know this, but when I did a master's in creative and professional writing, I ended up doing it in personality psychology. And my thesis, which was a full 225-page book, was on fatherhood. And the
See,
reason
I had
that's,
no idea. No,
oh, yeah,
I did not know the fatherhood piece. I knew everything up to that, but I did not know your thesis was on fatherhood. Please
it's
continue.
it's it's called Rewriting Fatherhood, a Symphony of Chaos. Now,
Killed the title.
contrary to your Genesis story, I had an amazing father, which still baffles me to this day because he did not have a father. So my dad's mother got pregnant at 16, and my dad's father just left and he never met him. So my dad's grandfather, who was a Polish immigrant working in a steel mill, raised him. And I don't know how this relationship went. I know my dad loved his grandfather so much that he named me after him. My exact name is his name. But my dad, who did not have a father, was an amazingly, I would argue, perfect father in a couple of ways. Um, he certainly was a pillar of masculinity, which I'll explain, but generous, loving. He loved nothing more than just to spend time with us on the floor, easy to laugh. Jeff, he never stopped showing his pride in me. He never stopped. To his dying day. I had a story. I literally sobbed my eyes out telling this story a few weeks ago that when I was 16, my parents who didn't have a pot to piss in. I mean, we grew up in mobile homes eating government cheese. And as just a good gesture, goodwill gesture, my dad would pay us money for a report card for good grades. The first time I ever got straight A's was like I was 16 years old, first semester of my junior year, and he was so proud. I still remember this chair. Like he's sitting in the living room in this chair, and he pulls out his wallet. And I said, and they don't have any money. They don't have any money. I said, Dad, I'm not doing this for you. Like I'm doing it for me. He pulled me down on his lap. I'm 16 fucking years old. Like I'm basically a grown man. And he's kissing me on my face and my neck, telling me how much he loved me and how proud he was of me. Like, that's how good of a dad I had. And he did not have a father. He did not have a father. And yet, here's another side of my dad. As loving and generous with his emotion as he was, one night, another memory that sticks out in my head, my 15 or 16-year-old sister had gone on a date. And this new boyfriend, so to speak, had, quasi assaulted her. They were making out and he just kind of pinned her down, wouldn't let her go. So she finally escaped. This was literally in our driveway as they were saying goodnight. She ran in the house and she just kind of, ran by everybody crying. So I went to see what happened. So I came upstairs. We were in a bi-level house and told my dad what happened. He literally, without a word, just walked over to his bedroom, grabbed a gun, and walked out the door. Didn't say a word. Just didn't say a word. And so that combination of I will protect my family, I will do anything it takes, and yet I'm the most loving, cuddly, supportive, generous dad you can be. Like that's what I grew up with. So I feel like I have kind of a leg up in this area. And maybe you can kind of bifurcate the two extremes.
Now, I'm just kind of resenting you right now, but let me get past my resentment. Like,
Mhm.
but that is such a beautiful and perfect from my perspective, that is such a beautiful, those two stories are the perfect juxtaposition of, in this instance, paternal masculinity. Just the generous emotional pride. And there ain't fucking nothing like a father's pride. I'm not minimizing the role of the mother. Not that's not I'm not but I'm just saying there is something about, and I have a buddy who he and I actually had some difficulties in our relationship because, and this was like, it wasn't even, didn't even realize it was happening. His dad passed away, and he had a very similar paternal experience as you. Father just teeming with pride. He went on to be a starting pitcher for Indiana University, was the only walk-on to ever be the captain of the baseball team. And, I asked him one day after his dad had passed, what's it like to have a father so proud of you? And he said, a very, very mediocre baseball player accomplishes what I accomplished. And that pissed me the fuck off. Dude, I didn't even realize it at the time, but it was like, that is so fucking unfair. And I kind of fucked up the friendship a little bit with
Yeah.
this like latent resentment that I was having towards him. And we since like have processed that, but it was the first time that I had like, it's the first time that that wound had been really, really unintentionally poked. But man, it fucking went through me like a shockwave of the absence of that.
Well, because this is such an interest of mine, I can't watch a movie, a TV show, read a book, listen to music without hearing and seeing the way that a father's approval is so coveted and so often never given. I see grown men. I have had 50 and 60-year-old, I had a 65-year-old man crying his eyes out, walking with me on the streets of Miami, telling me that his father, who is in his upper 80s, it still would not express any pride or affection toward him. This friend of mine, 65 years old, was in therapy and at his therapist's request wrote his father a letter and even said, Dad, I know you express emotions in your own way and et cetera, basically giving him an out, but I just want you to know I love you, etc. Gave it to his dad. His dad read it and pushed it aside and just basically got up and didn't say a word. Like still rejecting any note of even affection toward his own son. And of course, I can assume the kind of wounds that person has from his own father, etc. Um, but we never stop craving that. And I think that is part of this masculinity crisis between broken homes, the Hollywoodization of what you're kind of describing, start with All in the Family and go to Al Bundy,
Right.
Married with Children, and so forth. And, the man is always the bumbling fool. I hate the fact that the extreme right and the Andrew Tates and the manosphere has now hijacked it and made brash arrogance and misogyny equivalent to masculinity. But I think you and I would agree that that's not the goal. But at some point, I love your metaphor of a wife bringing her husband to therapy and like he's the bad little boy going to the principal's office. There has to be something in between those extremes, and I know you have worked through a lot of this with a lot of clients.
Well, and that has been just once I kind of started down my own path of healing my sense of masculinity. And a lot of that journey for me was, being a father to my children. And, one commitment that I made as a father was my children will know with absolute positive certainty there ain't a fucking thing that can happen in their life that they cannot run to me with. Like I don't, there's not a fucking thing that whatever it is, we will get through that because that was never an option for me. It was always And I wasn't even that bad of a kid. I mean, I did the experimentation and, those kinds of things, but did okay academically, was, pretty successful athletically, those kinds of things. But there just was this, I know the last place that I can go is my father. And my commitment to myself was my children will never know that feeling. They will absolutely know, no matter what, my dad's there for me. He's got my fucking back, even if I'm wrong. I may have some shit to sort out after the fact, but I can always run towards. I don't ever have to run away. And there were several instances along the way. I have two girls and a boy, as you know, where I actually got to experience that, where they came to me when they fucked something up, and we were able to get through it together. And the healing that occurred for me in that. And then, it's so interesting for you to talk about your dad because, my oldest daughter just got engaged, could not have grown a better future son-in-law in a petri dish. I
Hmm.
mean, it just absolutely phenomenal young man, protective as fuck. I mean, just checks both boxes as your father. Reagan will get engaged in the next year. Same thing, same kind of guy. That's very validating to me that, in their journey to find a man, that there's some reflection of what they received from me in that. So that was very healing. And then another part of it, Joe, honestly, was your clients need they need some fucking help. You're gonna have to up your game, bro. You're gonna have to get to work. No more of this man child. You don't get to hide behind the label of a therapist. Like you really have to do your own work. And it's been profoundly gratifying. And one of the things that I wanted to accomplish as a therapist was to be a therapist that men sought out, that I can go talk to that guy. That guy's, yeah, he's a therapist, but he's got enough dude in him that I feel like I can talk to him. That's almost exclusively my practice now, which has been for probably still do a lot of marriage because I believe marriage is more important than ever. But to have developed those abilities as a therapist to help men in a way that other men now seek me out is that's I didn't even think that I would achieve that. But to have some influence and credibility in that arena is beyond gratifying. I mean, it just is absolutely. We talked, before we started recording about meaning and finding meaning, and that's like the heroine of meaning for me.
Well, I'm interested in hearing about if that was something you had to really work to cultivate, because my bias that I bring to the table is I'm first and foremost a health scientist. All of my background educationally is in nutrition, health, and physical sciences. And then I veered out into social sciences and social psychology, and I really felt like that kind of brought it all together full circle for me. So I innately first start with biology. I know out of, let's say, there are 4 billion men on the planet, we have an unbelievable array of genetics including our genetic psychology, our personality types. And so when somebody just with such blasé disconcern says, oh, that's a beta male, that's an alpha male. Well, I'm not 6'4". I wish I was. I don't have a full head of blonde hair and blue eyes. Maybe I wish I did. There are a lot of things I didn't get to choose about my genetics. But when you say something about my conscientiousness or my drive or my sense of XYZ, just personality components, like I can't take credit for that. Nature, nurture, a combination of both, that's just what I got. How I act on it is within my control, partly because even my ability to act on it is tied back to my DNA and my genetics. So I think this is where there's a big disconnect between, guys who think, hey, as long as I just wear a flannel shirt and grow a beard, I'm an alpha male. Look at me, this. absolute cuck idiot, who's trying to, you know, dominate through his misogyny. And then you have other men who are literally trying to lift other people up of all, genders and sexes and stations in life. And yet they would look down on them as not alpha. I think this masculinity is something that not everybody can really accomplish perhaps how they want because of their DNA, their physical stature, their lot in life. So somebody who really would struggle with that and say, I know the law of the jungle still exists in us anthropologically. I know that the average woman says, I want this in a man, and that includes some perception of masculinity. What if I just don't have it? Like, what do you tell that guy in his relationships, in his, maybe even parenting, in his, the way he interacts with coworkers and bosses and so forth?
You're fucked.
I mean, that's
Like,
kind of joking aside. That's partly how I feel. Like I can't dunk a basketball. I'm not 6'8". So yes, I'm the NBA's out for me.
I really think that a significant amount of the male identity comes through competency of doing difficult things well. And again, that's not to the exclusion of women. I'm not saying that that's not a part of their identity, but I do think that men accepting and responding to difficult challenges and the way that we accept and respond to those challenges of some of those challenges are more universal, um you know employment, like, eh, attracting a mate, those kinds of things. I, e- I know the data, like on the dating apps of, like, what men get, the number of it's horrible. I mean, it's absolutely astounding. I can't believe that people still use those fucking dating apps.
Yeah,
And
like
like,
eight or so out of 10 women always swipe for like the same guy. Like there's one guy getting all
what
the
one
attention.
guy that's getting the line, and it's like, and yet as moth to flame, fucking like we just keep going towards those things.
But even so, let me interrupt you for just a second because you mentioned something I think that's profound. Being able to do hard things well, taking up challenges. Again, part of my conscientiousness and ambition, just genetically wired. You look at all the business risks I've taken, all the academia pursuits I've had, and win some, lose some, I still come up swinging. And as long as I'm one win ahead of my loss column, like I'm moving forward. Not everybody does that. And when I look at even a movie like Oppenheimer, like you take a nerdy fucking nuclear scientist and you have Cillian Murphy, is that his name, play him, and then he has a nude scene where he's just shredded. Like you still make the probably most beta male look like every woman is going to swoon. And that's what some of these men in society are facing. And how do you compete with that? How do you really show up with a sense of masculinity if you're just not the biggest swinging dick in the room?
I think you have to. I Evan just turned 22, just got a civil engineering job here in Chicago. He got a company car. He's learning how to drive in Chicago, which has him literally sleepless at night. Like, it's like, but are you okay? And he's like, fucking driving in Chicago, man. Like, who would have thought that that was going to be his biggest stress? And Evans, I'm 6'2", 250. Evans, 5'6". I mean, he's short. He's short, and that was an interesting challenge in parenting him, because I never knew what that was like. I never had I was always taller, bigger, whatever. Like, I always had some physical attribute that was superior to my peers. And
And you're
then,
aware of the research on what an advantage that is socially, right?
Oh, it's just disgusting. I mean, it's like, I mean, Warren Harding, right? Like, how the fuck does he become president? Because he was tall. Like, yeah. I mean, just absolutely. And then, so trying to develop a sensitivity to with Evan, and then trying to find challenges that he could respond positively to. And, my arena was athletic, later academic. Um, Early on, Evan starts listening to kind of philosophical videos on YouTube. And so we start to find that that's something that we have in common. And so he starts thinking about really difficult things and he starts thinking about them really well. And he and I are able to have, you know, vigorous conversations that he can't have with his friends. And so he starts to kind of recognize that about himself, that he's a philosophical thinker, that he's several steps ahead in conversations, those kinds of things. So he starts to get this sense of competence that starts to grow out of that. Then he starts to become more assertive in those arenas. He's got more confidence. So it develops that momentum. Then he decides last minute, like, civil engineering. And I'm like, fuck, you're on your own, bro. I can't even spell engineering. So, and then for him to go into high level math, those kinds of things, because he found some place to start to develop a sense of competence, which started to generate confidence. And and Joe, I've replicated that thousands and thousands of times. As you can imagine in my practice, I mean, I have seen i- i- every type of male that you can imagine, including homosexual. And I have worked one client in particular, which maybe we'll get into this on specifically on one of our podcasts, but he was homosexual and taught me as much about authentic masculinity as anyone ever has. And he was fearless in the way that he loved, fearless. And, you could argue to a fault because it resulted in a lot of pain in his life and those kinds of things. He, he had a clarity about that and a resolve of this is who I am. This is what I do. And it I don't know the exact formula, and I'm hope and I know that our conversations, just as we continue to have these conversations, we will hone in on that. But if you can find a spark of competence in a male that then leads to authentic confidence, certainty in who I am. I'm not I don't have to try to pretend to be somebody else. I'm not competing with somebody else. I know the goods that I bring to the table. That then gives them an overall momentum that really does it is attractive. I mean, confidence is the most true. I'm talking about authentic confidence. I'm not talking about any level of arrogance. Confidence has an ending point. I know what I'm good at, and I know what you should not listen to me about. Arrogance does not have that. That's why Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson and all these motherfuckers now have opinions about everything. Like they don't even have a lane. They know everything there is to know about everything. And it's just like,
So
okay,
here's what I love about the connection of confidence and competence. Speaking of Chicago, the
yes.
sitcom Shameless, are you familiar?
No, but you're like the
Oh
10th
my gosh.
person.
Okay, you got to watch that. Anyway,
Okay.
Frank, the dad, who's literally like an alcoholic, homeless philosopher, literally you'll love his character. At one point, it literally just a con man, like stealing from his own kids. At one point, he tells one of his sons that he gave them the greatest gift a father could give, neglect. because by neglecting you, I've made you hard. And it's like that old axiom, like hard times build hard men build soft times build soft
Yep.
men. So that generation, one of the things I swear to you that, and this may be news to you, even though we've been friends for almost 30 years, obviously, anybody can look at my resume, my bio, and say, "What in the fuck is that guy compensating for?" Who becomes a pro bodybuilder, does MMA, and also has four master's degrees and two doctorates. Like, what is up with that? And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you the entire etiology of my insecurity that drove me to that. And ultimately, gladly early on, it did develop a sense of self-awareness and confidence. But you're in Chicago 30 some years ago, 40, almost 50 years ago, when I was a child in northern Indiana, there was something called Pollock jokes. Are you familiar?
Uh, you have brought it to mind. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So back in the day, imagine me in the first grade, second grade, third grade. Everybody would always have a Pollock joke. Hey, a Pollock, an N-word, and a Jew or a priest walk into a bar and ensue the comedy. And the Pollock was always the stupid guy, like always doing the stupid thing. The Jew or the priest was always something else, and the black guy was always, another stereotype. But the Pollock was always the idiot. I started school a year early. I was on the cutoff. So, like in the fifth grade, or I'm sorry, the first grade, everybody was a year older. I'm already painfully pathologically introverted. I'm a year younger than everybody. I'm smaller than everybody. I was 5 pounds when I was born. I'm, barely 5'7.5" now. And so, I always felt literally small. And then I just keep hearing that my entire racial ethnicity is the stupid person. And then it even culminated one step worse when my older brother was a senior in high school and I was a sophomore, and we just happened to be in the same, like, I don't know, study hall or something in high school. And I said something, and he turned to me because he was a straight A student, very gifted. And he said to me with just disdain and disgust, "You are so shallow. You are so shallow." I'm repeating those words verbatim 30 some, 40 some years later because that's just one of those wounds where you question, am I? Like, am I? Am I not worthy of anything? Like, is my intellect, my entire essence just less than somebody else? So there was and ironically, I guess the protection of delusion, I never outwardly felt these things. It was just my subconscious. So when I started getting a taste of academic traction and I started realizing like, hey, I can kind of do this and I'm getting some pretty good grades and now I'm applying myself. It just snowballed and I loved it without realizing why I loved it. And the honest truth is all I wanted was because my parents were so poor and I grew up with four other siblings. And again, we lived in a level of poverty that I eventually learned to be embarrassed by and I wanted to escape. All I ever wanted to do was just go to college because I thought that was what we were taught. That's the way you get a life that you want. So I became an orthopedic physical therapist and I was done. I mean, white picket fence, married, and yet that impetus was still there, that momentum was still there, and so I just kept going until I'm building a career in an industry in a business, and I just didn't slow down until I realized, why am I doing this? Am I still trying to make up for something? And I realized at some point I wanted to do it. It was no longer just out of insecurity, but that
Sure.
is absolutely how it started. And I'm kind of tying this back to masculinity in that kind of action in somebody, I think attracts a lot of attention. I had so many men. I could probably list out 2 dozen, Jeff, men in my life who still come to me And in tears, they will tell me, like, you are my father figure. I've heard that phrase so many times. I wish my dad was more like you. These are sometimes men older than me. I wish my dad was more like you. And I think that is exactly what you're saying, that sense of competency. You have achieved something. You have slain dragons, and I can't seem to do that. And I attract those men, and it baffled me initially. I certainly don't know what to do with it. I should send them to you, but it has always been just an anomaly that keeps going.
Um, you can send them to me. And it's interesting because I, of the infinite amount of imposter complexes that I suffer from, as I started to have those kinds of experiences with other men. You want to talk about imposter syndrome? It was like almost wanting to deter them, like, no, I'm sorry, you've misread this. Like you really should pick somebody better. Um, but for whatever reason, maybe just my own ego, it was like, okay, I'll go with this. But then as it's like, that reciprocal dynamic of imparting something to them that maybe you had taken for granted as a man, but then you start to see them respond to that, and it's that synergy between men is, if 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 I could activate that socially and therapists go away by snapping my fingers, Joe, I would snap my fingers right now. It there is just the research is definitive about male interaction. One of the best treatments for male depression is time with friends, but that's been so, like, oh yeah, so you guys can just go like to a club or talk about titties, or like actually we have some, we may talk about titties, I mean, because they're awesome, but we also, like, there is also some substance to the interaction, and some camaraderie to that. And there's a male friendship crisis. I mean, I don't even think crisis is the right word. I don't think, I think it's just absence. I think men don't have friends by and large. I think men don't know how to make friends. The younger generations, are their lives are balanced a little bit more in the direction of friendship and friendship retention, which is great to see that swing back in that direction. Unfortunately for men, oftentimes it's too many fuckers in their basement playing Xbox. It's not, well, that's okay, that's not the replacement. In fact, experimentation with drugs and alcohol and sexual promiscuity are on the down because of video games and pornography. It's like
You're
that
right, exactly.
that is not a solution to, that is the wrong solution to that problem. Um, and somehow kickstarting male interaction, and you've experienced that, and I would imagine have come to, one of the things that I really value just in my personal growth, because is a sense of awe, finding a sense of awe in something, whether it be nature or music or whatever that is. And when I'm approached and asked to be an influence to somebody, it really ignites that sense of awe. That just
Exactly.
that sense of, okay, some cool shit is happening, pay attention.
Yeah, I another place I feel very fortunate is, besides having a great father that I think gave me a lot of inner confidence and peace. So that same insecurity I was feeling socially, my father was the anchor that really fueled a level of confidence to counterbalance that. But the other thing is just serendipitously, because I would have never created this on my own. My introversion is so high, but because of my academics and my career, very early on, I was invited to speak at a lot of science conferences and camps, and I was writing for, huge fitness magazines, and I had an international popularity that I arguably didn't deserve. But to this day, I don't think there's a city I could go to where I couldn't call somebody and they would be thrilled to see me, have me over for dinner. I have dozens of friends I could call and just share my deepest, darkest needs and secrets with, and an inner circle of really good friends that I just feel, we would die for each other. And I know how rare that is. Like I am so fortunate, and yet I'm self-aware enough to realize that that is the crisis point. Like very few people have that, and that's part of what needs to change. But one of the biggest voices in the space right now, ironically, is Scott Galloway, who is not a psychologist. He's a marketing professor, but he really has a big heart for this because he kind of missed the boat early in his life. Later in life, he had a couple kids, and now it's his quest to be the best father and to create a lot of awareness in the masculinity crisis. And I think he gets it exactly right because he addresses the physical anthropology. He was an athlete in college, scholarship athlete, and he's still at 60 years old, very fit, works out, etc. And he talks about that. Like for you to be physically fit and strong and have a persona of strength, when you walk into a room, people know like there's something different about that guy just because of his physical appearance. And then you have the social acumen, the intellect, he's now currently really talking about emotional generosity. And I'm going to say this as just a little bit of a sidebar. I don't know why, maybe part of my introversion, but 15 or 20 years ago, I rarely laughed. And I realized as like if you were telling me a joke or something you thought was funny about your day, I'm intellectually dissecting it and I'm finding no humor and I'm looking for the quote accuracy or impact of it instead of just being generous and just laughing. Because you know what that's like to cajole with somebody and just to interact in that emotional flow, interpersonal neurobiology, as Dr. Dan Siegel talks about. He founded that field. And so all of a sudden, I just made the decision I'm going to start laughing more. I'm going to look for opportunities to laugh. And now I promise you, I'm the loudest, quickest laugh in the room. And it was so opposite 15 years ago. And what I have gained from that is the ability to watch how that makes other people feel. They feel embraced because I'm so attentive to what they're saying and I'm enjoying it. Whereas before I was just a fucking asshole analyzing it. And that, Scott Galloway brings up that is emotional generosity. I'm doing it for other people. That is part of the essence of social psychology that I embrace. And yet, for a big part of my life, I just missed the boat.
Yeah, I had to rewire myself because I'm high on extroversion, decent public speaker, but my entire childhood I was told to be quiet, be quiet, be quiet, be quiet, be quiet. So I had so much shame around generating attention. And yet, as I continued to progress professionally, it, afforded those kinds of opportunities as well. Come speak, those kinds of things that would garner a significant amount of attention. And there was so much shame that I had to work through. And, I also remember e- I think my self-esteem was so damaged that I felt like I was doing people a favor by not engaging with them. It wasn't it wasn't, I'm fucking better than you, you're not worth my attention. Now, I most of the time I do believe it was interpreted that way, but that was not the position that I was coming from. My position that I was coming from was I'm really protecting you from an interaction that's probably just gonna somehow make you dumber. Um, And to your point, I now feel I like the term emotional generosity. I'm going to start using that. I feel obligated to it. I feel obligated to, particularly with men. If I can, if when I'm passing another man, I, if I can engage, it doesn't have to be anything other than just hello, hey, whatever. But men acknowledging other men versus, oh, this fucking Andrew Tate shit. Jesus goddamn Christ. Joe, what are
But
we going to
the
do
men
about
acknowledging men, that's the Harley wave under the handlebar, right? Like, what's up, bro?
these? And as you know, um, I since I've been in Chicago, I took an improv class, which was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. But then, started my training in stand up. Um, and it, it, as we were, as a part of the course, I felt like, I don't know, you can tell me what and it's always a fine line because it's like I don't in any way want to feel arrogant, but at the same time, I want to recognize like the level of influence that the universe has given me. And I do feel like with that level of influence, I do have an obligation to what you said, like to laugh with these other people, like to be encouraging to them, to those sorts of things. So I love that. I love that term emotional generosity. And that's something that I feel like way too late in the game, but better late than ever. I finally feel grounded enough that I can be emotionally generous. Before, I just felt like, who the fuck would want to talk to me? Who the fuck would care if I laughed at their joke?
Well,
And
that's why
being freed of that now to be able to just be generous is a wonderful feeling.
And that's why I think that is a good contrast when Scott Galloway talks about the fact that you need to have the confidence in yourself physically that I can take care of myself, I can take care of my family, I can take care of other people. If something happens in this room, I got it. I'm the guy. Get behind me. But then he's also talking about that softer side of masculinity.
Yeah.
I'm also emotionally available. I'm emotionally generous. I'm comfortable with my feelings. He had a
Just
similar
like your
story.
dad, those two stories about your dad are just
Yeah.
such a beautiful, beautiful illustration
And
of
that's me to a
authentic
core.
men.
Like I have become my father. I'm going to wrap up with this story.
What the
My
fuck? I may have
grandson,
more. What if I got more?
well, no, I mean, well,
No, I'm
you can
kidding.
reciprocate. Um, so just like my dad picking up a gun and walking out the door without saying a word, I get a text from my wife. Our grandson, our oldest grandchild, just started his first week of preschool. And in the first week, he's already been bullied. And first of all, this kid, his dad is 6'6". My grandson is literally twice the size of everybody in his class. He looks like he's 12 and he's 4. So he is my daughter who is raising him is so phenomenal as a mom. He he will literally come up to her and say I'm sad or I'm happy or he will cry. He has the emotional maturity that I wish most grown men have. So he's in preschool and he starts missing his mom and he starts crying. And another little kid starts saying, "Ah, you're such a baby, cry baby, blah blah blah, little pussy ass bitch, blah blah blah," And so my grandson comes home and he tells his mom this, like I was sad and I was crying, and this, little twerp, was making fun of me and called me a baby and this and that. And so my daughter is, consoling him, saying it's okay to cry if that's how you feel, and blah blah blah. And so my wife is replicating this narrative on a text, and my first response was, "I need a name." Like that was my response. It's like, get the gun. I'm walking out of the house. Like I reverted to my dad instantly. Just give me a name. I'm going in. And then my second reaction was, okay, this poor little kid doing the bullying, what kind of a shitty dad does he have? Because he had to learn that somewhere, right? And so now I'm feeling empathy toward this kid, and we probably need to go hug this kid and show him what real masculinity and fatherhood is. But again, like those are the two sides of the coin, right? Like I'm going in like a saber-toothed tiger to protect my grandson, and then I can kind of assess it and realize the social dynamics and then come to a better conclusion. But I feel like that is the essence of masculinity. And it comes down to this phrase, power under control. It's not bravado, it's not arrogance. It's, I don't need to forecast or project strength. It's just here. You're going to see it in my eyes. You're going to see it in my actions. You're going to feel it in my gestures. And I think people can learn that to some degree, men who feel like they're missing it. And I'm going to go back to what you said about finding something that you can be confident about because you're gaining some competence. And then in whatever social circles you find yourself in, because social psychology is me plus context. That's the definition of social. Personal psychology, clinical psychology is what's happening in my head. That's the psychology of me. Social psychology is me plus context, me plus you. It's the science of us. And I feel like that has been a big part of my own personal evolution is being able to understand myself, smooth off the rough edges I needed to, integrate what I needed to, and then get out of my head and join us, join society. So I'm going to do one thing, and I'm going to ask you to finish this way.
Okay.
You're in clinical psychology, you're in practice. My
Yes.
background later in life was social psychology. I want to give a prompt for people listening to this from a social psychology perspective, and then I want you to give one from a personal psychology, clinical psychology perspective. Mine for the men listening would be to find a social situation where you have to vulnerably go out on a limb and project some kind of confidence, even if you don't feel it. So, for example, you want to ask somebody out and you're too afraid, you're the wallflower, you're not going to do it. You're just going to do it. You're just going to risk it. You're going to potentially just ask a male. Maybe you're 45 years old, you don't have enough male friends. You're literally going to go up to another man you know and just say, "Hey, will you want to do something Friday? You want to watch a game, you want to do something." You're going to risk being social because I promise you, everybody else out there is wishing they had the courage to do that. They're wishing somebody would approach them. That's this crisis of masculinity, the crisis of manhood, is we're not connecting, we're not bonding, we're not being pro-social. So that's my prompt to our audience, and I would like to hear any kind of summary you want to give of masculinity and what you would prompt them to do on more of a clinical personal psychology.
I when you were talking about, and I do think I do think the the term holistic has become so grotesquely overused, but I do feel like uh, masculine mind and body, I think I, I don't, I think they're inseparable. And
Agree.
I think you got to take a certain care of your body. I mean, you want to have a sense of certainly feel I can do what I want with my body. My body doesn't restrict me. I can, whatever it is. Um, and again, that's a topic that you and I'll touch on many, many times. I, when Evan was his freshman year in high school, he came home and he said, I want to start wrestling. And I'm like, oh shit. Because, these kids in Southern Indiana, they start wrestling when they're 3 years old. And he's like, I want to start wrestling at, you know, the freshman year. And it's like, okay, bro. Um, and I tried to, I was like, it just don't get discouraged by outcomes because a lot of these kids have been doing it for a lot longer. Just you're taking on a massive challenge. I'm so fucking proud of you for taking on the challenge and just don't get discouraged too quickly. And he did it for a couple of years and you know, and he can come at you. He has a certain level, he can come at you if he needs to. And he's low, so he can get you. But we
Take
were
out
at
your
a
knees.
yeah, we were at a music festival and it's first concert that Evan had ever been to and we were we were all waiting to see this certain band perform and there was about I think it was the summer before Evan's freshman year of college and we just happened to be hanging out with some kids that were junior seniors in college and again I'm not really involved in it. Evans and he's very high on introversion. um Something happens to that little fucker at music festivals though. He turns into like I don't know what that species is. So he's hanging out with these guys, he's chatting, just they're laughing and one guy's buying a round of drinks, another guy's buying a round of drinks, those kinds of things. Well, then this piece of shit motherfucker just comes through the crowd and shoves Evan, and Evan says something appropriate. He's not like it, but it's like, hey man, something. Dude turns around. Joe, I'm not kidding. The second that he turned around, all of those guys that Evan had been talking to were on this motherfucker. And he was begging, like, hey man, I'm sorry. Like, I just wanted to get like what. So there was a level, Evan asserted a level of appropriate masculine influence, just in that short period of time where all of a sudden, like, these guys are like, you now have a problem, guy. You didn't think you had a problem. And so it just was an interesting lesson in what the influence of masculinity can be. Um, and again, it is such a broad spectrum, and that's the excitement of this podcast is to be able to start to color all the shades of the spectrum rather than saying alpha or beta. If
Right.
I could give a prompt, I would say, and I use this exercise a lot. I stole it from a very renowned psychologist by the name of Martin Seligman, who, if I ever met him, I'd pee pee in my pants a little bit.
A few of his
Um,
books are in my office here, actually.
yeah, and it's called the best friend exercise, and it is if I were framing it up to a client this way, I would say, okay, the next time I see you, I want you to take the time to write out an introduction of your best friend. And I want you to think about the emotional tone in which you would introduce your best friend. I want you to think about all the attributes that you would assign to your best friend and examples of those attributes and every element of introducing your very best friend to someone new. But you'll be describing you. And it's hard to get men. We're so fucking resistant to this kind of bullshit. But and I've made myself do the exercise and I do it with some degree of regularity. Um, it's oftentimes as men, only, and I'm not saying exclusively as men, but I do think as men, we only look at ourselves through our inadequacies. And we start thinking about some level of competence or where can I start to create some momentum or those, and it's like I don't have any because this exercise is a struggle for most men to to think in detail of the positive attributes. I know how you would introduce me, you know, and I'd be like, keep going, motherfucker. This is awesome. But for a man to, and again, it has to be legitimate. You're not making shit up, but find the things about yourself and let yourself venture into feeling that that level of and it's there. You're doing something, man. You're fucking doing something. You have some emotional characteristic. You're funny or you're patient or you're resilient or they're there. Right now the list may be shorter than you want it to be, but you have some beginning points in which you could be genuinely enthusiastic about yourself if you gave yourself permission to do that. And that can become the genesis of really creating the momentum that keeps revealing more about yourself.
And exactly how you describe that is why I feel like our mission in our collective conversation that we're going to continue is the understanding that we really do have infinite generations of potential. Every single ancestor before us who fought and died and survived and did all of the things that it took to get us here, that is epigenetically and genetically in our DNA. It just takes you to unleash it. And your story of Evan was a little spark of leadership that affected everybody around him. And again, personality, body shape, size, age, it doesn't matter. When you can socially influence people around you like that, that is, I don't care if you are male or female or in between, that is the masculine essence. It's leadership and power under control. That was a phenomenal way to end this. So, Jeff Stuckey, we're going to do this again, obviously. This is kind of our flagship. And so I don't know if that's a
Maiden
good thing
voyage,
to
buddy.
say,
Here we
like
go.
episode number one.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll get better. But I think it was a great start. A topic we will probably continue, but then branch off into other areas of what it means to be fully human.
Uh, Absolutely. And could not be more excited about this conversation, but then the upcoming conversations, just knowing the affinity that I have for you, the friendship that we have, the underdeveloped friendship that we have, and this venue and this endeavor now gives us fertile ground to really explore all of that potential. So hold on tight, boys, because it's going to be one hell
And
of a
that's all it
ride here.
is. That's just you and I spending time together, and just whoever voyeuristically wants to pay attention, that's fine. This is just all about you and me.
Just fine. Yes, sir.
All right. Well, anybody who is watching or listening, thank you. Share this if you think anybody could benefit, and we look forward to more episodes in Human.